This is my tale, and my name is Mary. Jack and Linda Thompson, my parents, had it all. A lovely suburban home, prosperous occupations, and a plan that included bearing their prized heir a boy. They got me instead. I recall the moment I discovered I wasn't the child they had imagined. I heard my mother talking on the phone when I was 5 years old and playing with my dolls in the living room. Yes, it's true. We're having a boy. I had never heard such enthusiasm in her voice before. You're not aware of how long we've been waiting for this. At last a son. Those were cutting remarks. Though I didn't completely get it at the time, I could feel the pain of being unwelcome and second best. After that, things soon changed. Both Mom's tummy and our distance from one another became larger. Dad worked nonstop, and when he came home, the discourse revolved around the upcoming newborn boy. Mom summoned me into the kitchen one day. "Mary, sweetie, we need to talk." I slid onto a chair with my legs hanging loose. "What is it, Mommy?" She talked without looking at me. "You'll be spending some time with Grandma. Is it not thrilling? It's time for Mommy and Daddy to get ready for the baby. Besides, you'll enjoy yourself more with Grandma." In an instant, I was transported to Grandma's residence. Dad's mother, Grandma Rose, was a retired professor of English literature. Her home was a small, comfortable one that smelled like freshly made cookies and was full with books. It was unusual living with Grandma. She seemed unaffected by my presence and really listened to me when I spoke. She would tell me tales about her time as a teacher, and we would read for hours together. I felt really loved for the first time in my life. The 2 years passed so quickly. When Dad arrived at Grandma's house, I was 7 years old. Without fully looking me in the eyes, he continued, "Mary, it's time to come home. Your brother needs you." Brooder. The term seemed unfamiliar. Dad talked awkward small chat throughout the quiet moments as we drove home. "Ethan is the name of your brother. He is now one. Mary, you're a big sister now. That's a significant duty." Though I wasn't sure what that meant, I nodded. I had no idea that my childhood was going to come to an end. We arrived at our home's driveway. It felt different, even though it looked the same. With a kid on her hip, Mom was standing at the doorway. With an unusually official tone, she added, "Mary, meet your brother Ethan." I turned to face the plump boy with wavy blonde hair. With a gurgle, he extended a chubby hand in my direction. "Hello, Ethan," I murmured. At the age of 7, I suddenly transcended my role as a sister. I turned into a caregiver, an obligation, and a built-in babysitter. My early years vanished to be replaced by unclean diapers, unceasing watchfulness, and the burden of expectations I was too young to handle. I was changing diapers and warming bottles while my classmates were learning to ride bikes and playing with dolls. "Mary, can you watch Ethan while I make a call?" Not really asking, Mom would say. I would nod and instinctively grab for my younger brother. I loved Ethan, very much so. It wasn't that I didn't love him. I had been enamored with his toothless grin and clumsy small hands from the beginning. However, the ongoing accountability was too much to bear. The days passed in a whirl of homework, housework, and child watching. I was so tired from juggling, making sure Ethan was okay and safe with finishing my assignments. However, despite my best efforts, it never seemed to be sufficient. I took Ethan to the park one fatal day. At 2 years old, he was vivacious and inquisitive. Just as I went to tighten my shoelace, something terrible happened behind my back. "Mary." A thump followed by Ethan's shriek that pierced the atmosphere. He was lying on the ground, his knee gushing, when I turned to look at him. As I tried to calm his cries and scoop him up, panic struck. Mom lost it the moment we came home. Cradling Ethan, she yelled, How could you be so careless? You're supposed to watch him. I apologize. I simply, no excuses. Dad spoke out, his cheeks flushed with rage. Enter your room. Later, we'll talk about your penalty. With tears flowing down my cheeks, I ran upstairs. Even though I was only a child, I was trying my hardest. Therefore, it wasn't fair. The mishaps multiplied. I didn't blow on Ethan's hot porridge sufficiently, causing him to burn his tongue. I also couldn't stop Ethan from falling and getting a hit on his head. Every time, the penalties became more severe, and my parents' dissatisfaction became more apparent. Grandma Rose was my rock through it all. When she could, she would drop by, her presence a comfort to my bruised soul. I heard her addressing my parents in the kitchen during one visit. Grandma spoke sharply in her normally soft voice. This is unacceptable. Mary is not a nanny, she is a child. Your partiality for Ethan is causing her pain. Please, Mother, Dad moaned. These are our kids. What is beneficial for them is known to us. Do you? Grandma put out a challenge. Because from where I'm standing, you're neglecting one child in favor of the other. That's enough. Mom cut in. We appreciate your concern, but this is our family. We'll raise our children as we see fit. I threw myself into my studies. School became my sanctuary, a place where I could shine on my own merits. And shine I did. My grades were a silent rebellion against the notion that I wasn't good enough. The years flew by, and before I knew it, I was standing at a crossroads. High school was behind me, and college loomed ahead. Despite the constant struggle at home, I'd managed to excel in my studies. It was my ticket out, my chance at freedom. When the acceptance letter arrived, I could hardly believe my eyes. Not only had I been accepted to study investment management, but I'd also received a full scholarship. My hand shook as I read the words over and over again. Mom, Dad. I called out, racing down the stairs. I got in, full scholarship. Oh, thank goodness. Mom sighed, relief evident in her voice. That saves us a fortune. We need to start saving for Ethan's college fund. My heart sank. Of course, it wasn't about my achievement. It was about the money they wouldn't have to spend on me. The first few months were a whirlwind of classes, new friends, and the exhilarating taste of freedom. The money from my parents, combined with the small amounts Grandma Rose secretly sent, was just enough to scrape by. I was careful with every penny, knowing how precious this lifeline was. But 6 months into my college journey, everything changed again. My phone rang one evening as I was studying for a finance exam. Mary, Mom's voice came through curt and businesslike. We won't be sending you any more money. Ethan needs tutors if he's going to have any chance at college. We need to focus our resources on him. Now I felt the familiar sting of rejection, of being cast aside. But Mom, I can barely. You're an adult now. Mary, she cut me off. You need to solve your own problems. We can't keep supporting you forever. The next few weeks were a blur of stress and sleepless nights. I scoured job boards, applied to every position I could find. Finally, I landed a part-time gig at a nearby cafe. The hours were long, the pay was meager, but it was something. Balancing work and studies was brutal. I'd rush from classes to shifts, then stay up late into the night studying. Dark circles became a permanent fixture under my eyes, and my grades started to slip. One particularly rough day, I called Grandma Rose, desperate for a friendly voice. Mary, sweetheart, you sound exhausted, she said, concern evident in her voice. The dam broke through tears. I told her everything. The cut-off allowance, the grueling work hours, the struggle to keep up with my studies. Listen to me, Mary, Grandma cut herself off, taking a deep breath. You focus on your studies. I'm increasing your monthly allowance, and don't you dare argue with me about it." "But Grandma—" "No buts," she said firmly. "You deserve this education, and you shouldn't have to kill yourself working to get it. Your parents? Well, let's just say I'll be having words with them." True to her word, Grandma's support allowed me to cut back my work hours. I could breathe again, focus on my classes. My grades improved, and for the first time in months, I felt hope. The years at college flew by in a blur of textbooks, exams, and late-night study sessions. Before I knew it, I was standing on the stage, diploma in hand, magna cum laude gleaming on the certificate. As I scanned the audience, I spotted Grandma Rose, beaming with pride. My parents and Ethan were noticeably absent. With my degree in hand, doors opened. I landed a job at Stonebridge Investments, a prestigious firm in the city. The salary was more money than I'd ever seen, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly independent. To save money, I moved in with Sarah, a coworker who became a fast friend. Our tiny apartment was a far cry from the dorms, but it was ours, and it felt like freedom. When my first paycheck arrived, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it. I scoured every secondhand bookstore in the city until I found it, a rare first edition of Grandma's favorite author. The following weekend, I took a train to my hometown, gift in hand. Grandma's face lit up when she saw me at her door. "Mary, what a wonderful surprise." I presented her with a wrapped book, watching as tears welled in her eyes when she opened it. "Oh, my dear girl," she whispered, hugging me tight. "You shouldn't have." "I wanted to," I said simply. "You've done so much for me, Grandma." As we chatted over tea, I mentioned visiting my parents. Grandma's face tightened slightly, but she nodded. "I'm sure they'd love to see you." But when I called, Mom's voice was distant. "Oh, this weekend we're quite busy, Mary. Perhaps another time." The rejection stung, but I pushed it aside. I spent the weekend with Grandma instead, relishing her warmth and genuine interest in my life. As I boarded the train back to the city on Sunday, I couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and relief. Time marched on. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye, and my career soared. My bosses praised my work ethic and insight, and the bonuses started rolling in. Soon I was able to afford my own apartment, a small sun-filled space that was all mine. One evening, as I was settling in for a quiet night, my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. "Mary," she said without preamble. "These teachers, they just don't understand Ethan. They're giving him such poor grades. He barely scraped into City College." I bit my lip, choosing my words carefully. "Mom, maybe college isn't the right path for everyone. There are great vocational courses Ethan culled." "Don't be stupid," she snapped. "Your brother is brilliant, much smarter than you, actually. He's just misunderstood. He'll show everyone. You'll see." As I hung up, I gazed around my apartment, the tangible proof of my success. Yet somehow, I still felt like that little girl desperately seeking approval. Life has a funny way of appending expectations. While I was building my career, brick by careful brick, Ethan's college experience was crumbling around him. It was a crisp autumn day when Mom called again, her voice tight with frustration. "Ethan's been expelled," she said without preamble. "He's coming home." She launched into a tirade about unfair professors and a system designed to fail students like Ethan. I listened, biting my tongue against the urge to point out the thousands they'd spent on his education, the loans they'd taken out to rent him a luxury apartment, the generous allowance they'd provided, all things I'd never had. "We'll figure something out," Mom concluded. "Ethan just needs time to find his path." I thought about Ethan, now 21, returning to our childhood home while I, at 27 was forging ahead in my career. The contrast was stark, but I pushed the thought aside. Comparison is the thief of joy, after all. Life, however, had other plans for me. It was at a company event that I met Jack, tall, kind-eyed, with a quick wit that made me laugh like I hadn't in years. Our whirlwind romance swept me off my feet, and before I knew it, we were standing in a small chapel exchanging vows in front of a handful of loved ones. Grandma Rose was there, of course, beaming with pride. My parents attended too, though their smiles seemed a bit forced. Ethan didn't come, citing a vague prior commitment. Jack and I moved into his apartment, a cozy space that quickly became home. His parents, Tom and Ellen, welcomed me with open arms. Their warmth was a balm to my soul. A year into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. The joy that filled me was indescribable. When we announced it to our families, Jack's parents were ecstatic. My parents' reaction was more subdued. "Do you know what it is yet?" Mom asked. I immediately shook my head. It's too early to tell. As the months passed, their interest in the baby's gender became almost obsessive. When we finally revealed it was a boy, their relief was palpable. "A grandson," Dad exclaimed. "That's wonderful news, Mary." I tried not to read too much into their reaction, focusing instead on preparing for our son's arrival. Little Alexander came into the world on a rainy Tuesday, his tiny hand wrapping around my finger as if to say, "I'm here, Mom. I've got you." As I held him, I vowed to give him all the love and support I'd craved as a child. While I was navigating new motherhood, Ethan continued to drift. He picked up odd jobs here and there, but nothing stuck. He was still living at home, much to our parents' poorly concealed frustration. During a rare family dinner, I tried to broach the subject gently. "You know, Ethan, there's an entry-level position opening up at my company. I could put in a good word." "Mary," Mom cut me off sharply. "Your brother doesn't need your charity. He's just taking his time to find the right opportunity." Dad nodded in agreement. "You were lucky, Mary. Things just fell into place for you. Not everyone has it so easy." I blinked, stunned. Lucky? The sleepless nights studying, the years of juggling work and school, the constant struggle to prove my worth. None of that felt like luck. But I swallowed my retort, not wanting to start an argument. As I looked around the table at my parents' defensive postures, Ethan's sullen expression, and little Alexander babbling happily in his high chair, I realized something profound. Family isn't just about blood. It's about support, understanding, and unconditional love. Sometimes the family you choose can fill the gaps left by the one you're born into. As Alexander's 5th birthday approached, we planned a trip to my hometown, Jack, our son, and me. Our first stop was Grandma Rose's house. We spent a wonderful afternoon with her, Alexander captivated by her stories and the old photos she showed him. As we were leaving, Grandma pulled me aside. "Your parents have been struggling," she said softly. "Maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones." The next day, we stood on my parents' doorstep. Mom answered, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Dad was in his armchair. Ethan slouched on the couch. They both looked up as we entered. After awkward greetings and stilted small talk, Mom cleared her throat. "Mary, we need to talk to you about something." What followed was a halting explanation of their financial troubles, medical bills, Ethan's ongoing unemployment, the lingering college debt. It had all piled up. "We hate to ask," Dad said, not meeting my eyes, "but we could use some help." I glanced at Jack, who gave me a subtle nod. Despite everything, these were my parents. Of course, I heard myself say, "I can send some money each month." The relief on their faces was palpable. We worked out the details, $1,500 a month, with the understanding that they could reach out if emergencies arose. Over the next 2 years, I faithfully sent the money each month. There were occasional requests for extra help. A broken water heater, unexpected car repairs, which I always obliged. It felt good to be able to help, to maybe finally earn their approval. When Thanksgiving rolled around, we found ourselves back in my childhood home. The house was full. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and Grandma Rose all crowded around the dining table. As we ate, Mom and Dad couldn't stop talking about Ethan. He's been at his new job for 3 months now. Mom beamed. Such a hard worker, Dad chimed in. Did you see the new sofa cushions? Ethan bought those with his first paycheck. So thoughtful of him. I glanced around the room, noting the new curtains, the fresh paint on the walls, the updated appliances in the kitchen, all purchased with the money I'd been sending. But I bit my tongue, not wanting to spoil the mood. Jack squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. Alexander, oblivious to the undercurrents, happily chatted with his cousins. The Thanksgiving dinner continued, the chatter of family filling the air. I was just starting to relax when Alexander tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, can I go play in the other room?" he asked, his eyes bright with the restlessness of a 5-year-old at a grown-up gathering. I nodded, ruffling his hair. "Sure, sweetie. Just don't make too much noise, okay?" As Alexander scampered off, I turned back to the conversation. Barely a minute had passed when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen, confusion furrowing my brow. The caller ID read Mom. I looked up at my mother, sitting directly across from me at the table. "Mom, why are you calling me?" She frowned, shaking her head. "I'm not calling you, dear. My phone's in the living room." Just then, Alexander reappeared in the doorway, my mother's phone clutched in his small hands. The room felt quiet as all eyes turned to him. "Mommy," he said, his voice ringing in the sudden silence. I found Grandma's phone and I wanted to see who she talks to. I saw a funny name, Cash Cow, and clicked on it to see who it would call. "Why did it call you Mommy? What's a cash cow?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Cash cow? Is that all I am to them? I looked around the table. My relatives sat frozen, forks halfway to their mouths. Grandma Rose's face was a mask of shock and anger, and my parents had gone deathly pale. The silence stretched thick and suffocating until something inside me snapped. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Cash cow." I repeated, my voice trembling. "Is that what I am to you?" My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. My father couldn't even meet my eyes. "Let me tell you all something," I continued, addressing the whole table. "For the past 2 years, I've been sending my parents $1,500 every month. When they've asked for extra, I've sent that too. All those new things you've been admiring, the curtains, the appliances, the fresh paint, that was all bought with my money." I could feel tears pricking at my eyes, but I blinked them back. I did this despite years of being treated like I was second best, despite being sent away as a child, despite having to work my way through college while Ethan got everything handed to him. I did it because I thought maybe finally you'd see me. You'd be proud of me. My voice cracked on the last words. But instead, I'm just your cash cow, a source to be milked dry. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Jack stood up and put his arm around me, a solid presence at my side. Alexander, not fully understanding but sensing the tension, came and wrapped his arms around my legs. The silence in the room was deafening. I stood there, heart pounding, waiting for my parents to say something, anything. An apology, an explanation, even a denial. But what came next shocked me to my core. My mother's face hardened, her eyes flashing with indignation. Well, of course you help us. We gave birth to you, raised you. It's your duty. Don't be so sensitive about a silly phone contact. It was like someone smacked me. Years of repressed hurt and fury finally came to the surface. Responsible. Do you believe that to be the case? Let me be clear, though, I'm done for good as of today. Not a single penny extra. No further assistance. I'm severing my connections. Mom quickly became different when the topic of losing financial support was brought up. Her eyes filled with tears. After everything we've done for you, how can you be so callous? Glancing around the table, she tried to get our relatives to lend her support. But they said nothing, much to my amazement and hers. They averted their eyes from her beseeching stare, one by one. Grandma Rose finally spoke, her voice trembling with rage. Heartless. After the way you've treated Mary, can you dare to call her heartless? Let me tell you something, though you can forget about any inheritance. And I also want nothing to do with you going forward. Everything is going to Alexander and Mary. Chaos broke out in the room. Dad was attempting to comfort Mom as she was crying, and Ethan just sat there looking puzzled. I felt grounded in the middle of it, all by Jack's hand resting on my shoulder. He said, "I think it's time we left." I nodded, feeling abruptly worn out. Gathering Alexander, we got our belongings, bid farewell to Grandma Rose and the other family members, and left without saying anything more to my parents. As promised, I ceased providing any financial assistance. The calls came in almost immediately, at first beseeching, then irate, finally nasty. I threatened them with legal action if they didn't cease sending me threats in the texts. The mails and calls eventually stopped altogether. Life continued. I concentrated on Jack, my profession, and parenting Alexander. Grandma Rose grew to be an even more significant part of our lives, her love and encouragement healing the scar caused by my parents' deceit. Years went by. I had heard via the grapevine that Ethan had accrued large debt. My parents had to sell their house as a last-ditch attempt to save him. They eventually settled into a little flat on the other side of town. I was shocked to discover that, upon hearing the news, I had no emotions left. No sympathy, no satisfaction, and not even anger. Just as I had made my decisions, so had they. I'm struck by a deep realization as I watch Alexander play in our garden today. Jack at my side and Grandma Rose smiling from her favorite patio chair. I finally found my place, my value, and nothing can take it away from me.